You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
For the most part, the holiday season is over, but the draft season in Major League Soccer, it is not. It doesn't seem like it's ever over. Really, Kevin, how you doing, Kevin Laramee in Montreal?
I'm underneath a white blanket of snow this morning, which means that I'm getting ready for the draft too.
All right, and Travis Clark, of course, from Talk to Our Soccer. He's our draft expert. We've had Travis on many times before, our college expert as well. How you doing, Travis?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I know this is Duane's favorite time of the year and favorite thing about Major League Soccer and the many conversations we've had over the years.
Yes, the New Year's resolution is to not be quite as dismissive of the Super Draft, although I still think it's perhaps the silliest name draft on earth. But we'll leave that well enough alone, Travis. We didn't actually have a chance to talk to you at the end of the college season this year because there was apparently a Major League Soccer playoff drive in Canada that we were entirely focused on. So could you just, before we get into the draft, just talk about the end of the college season and what you thought about the overall quality of it this year?
For the men's or women's or both? I guess
Yeah,
I'll just
both, yeah.
jump into both. It's not really changing all that much. Just to kind of give a brief overview to your listeners, Stanford won the men's program for the second men's college cup for the second year in a row, and then the Canadian-influenced West Virginia Mountaineers fell short of the national championship on the women's side, losing in the title game against USC, and what actually turned out to be one of the more compelling finals we've seen in soccer. Soccer finals tend to be so bad, but thanks to an early goal, there tended to be more than just one goal. As you see, USC, University of Southern California, won 3-1 in that one. So, you can paint a broad brush. Obviously, college soccer is complex and complicated. For the men's side, you're seeing basically the similar trends. There's a lot. A strong foreign influence coming over that are kind of supplanting a lot of the top U.S. kids that are deciding to skip college altogether. I was recently down at the U.S. U17 men's national team watching them at the Nike friendlies, and it was actually pretty staggering the number of players who had already signed pro with the MLS teams or had signed with agents already and forfeited that eligibility. So, those trends aren't really changing too dramatically. The games, has its ups and has its downs. It was kind of a bummer for Stanford to win, the kind of the way that it did. I believe 2-0-0 penalty kick victories, basically. Wake Forest, which plays a nice brand of soccer, has three midfielders that I think will all play in MLS one day. Ian Harks, Ja'Cory Hayes, and Brad Dunwell. They were denied, just didn't have enough to kind of get it over the line there at the end. So, side, the game's thriving. I would say, we're seeing players, as we'll touch on, instead of picking the NWSL rat, we're in this sort of weird 2-year period where, there's no impending World Cup, there's no Olympics on the horizon, because we just had that in 15 and 16. So, some players are heading abroad, and I think it'll be good for the game overall. And, as women who are playing college soccer now see, well, hey, maybe I can try to go to Europe instead of just putting all my eggs in the domestic basket. So, it's exciting. It's too short. It should be longer, but that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day.
Fair enough. Since you brought it up, I was going to wait till near the end of the interview to do this, but we might as well finish this thought now, and then I'll let Kevin jump in with the MLS Super Draft stuff. Ashley Lawrence signing with PSG to me seemed like a very interesting move. This is a player that would have been pretty highly ranked within a Canadian allocation, I think. Someone that would have had an absolute opportunity to get an NWSL contract. Just continue your thoughts on that. Do you think that trend's going to continue and that the NWSL is going to need to maybe do some things to try and draw some of those top prospects in?
Certainly, it could be good for the league in the long run to see competition like that. On the flip side, it's good for the player to, be pushed out of their comfort zone, to flock to clubs that are more, women's clubs that are well supported like that, just in terms of the financial clout. We're also hearing, I'm sure you guys are well aware that there's rumors that Kadisha Buchanan will be following suit to join Lyon. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but it should force the NWSL to take a hard, long look at itself. They're talking about expansion, and yet, there's a talent drain, just so to speak. So, yeah, I think that it could be good for both the player and the league in the long run if managed and responded to well. We're seeing that it's going beyond just these, college hopefuls. Crystal Dunn is leaving the league to play for Chelsea Ladies over in England. And of course, Alex Morgan is doing her season, I believe, loan. It's sort of a mid-season loan over in France as well. So I think, it's part of the shifting dynamics on the women's side. And I think it could be good, overall, if handled and responded to appropriately.
When we look at the 2017 Super Draft class, two names rise above the rest that are, in many mock drafts, the two overall choices. For once, we have Jeremy Ebobisse and Abu Danladi. What can you tell us, Travis, about those two standouts of last year in 2016 in the NCAA?
Well, they're interesting cases. Ebobisse actually decided to skip last fall's season of college soccer. I know he dropped out actually in the spring semester of 2016 to search for pro opportunity. I never got the scuttlebutt on what happened and what transpired, but sort of I think it was July, August, he was announced as a signee as part of the Generation Adidas class. But instead of, going back to school or playing in the fall, he actually just kind of bounced around. He spent some time on loan from MLS to the Charleston Battery in the USL. Again, just weird, stupid MLS things that we just don't need. Let the kid join a team, please. Him and Abu Danladi are very similar. They're two dynamic, athletic forwards that should be able to do well. In MLS, they've got the speed, the dynamism, the pace. I hate kind of throwing those attributes out at a player because they're decent soccer players as well. But, when you look at, guys making that jump to MLS, you want to look at their physical capabilities more so than in other leagues. This we know. Danladi's issue has been staying healthy. He's been in and out of the lineup at UCLA. He's special. He scores a bunch of goals, has the chance to be a very strong player for whoever ends up with him from season one, but that's if he can stay on the field and not on the trainer's table. So I think what helps them stand out is there's a lack of a real dynamic sort of attacking presence offered from the senior class. And, we've discussed the sort of the pitfalls of college and its shortcomings as well. And, that kind of is embodied by the fact that these guys are two of the best players on offer.
We talked about forwards. The first defender probably going to be drafted, a name suited to be a great Jazz player, Miles Robinson. What can you tell us about this Syracuse center back?
Yeah, he's someone that's versatile. He's played a little bit of right back, and I think Syracuse played a three-man back line too. So he can be plugged into a number of spots, and that always helps guys get on the field, get playing time. He's a pretty classic American center back. When you're looking at what he does in terms of shutting defenders down, he can keep pace with quick attackers. He's not a slow, big, plodding guy that you see a lot of college soccer. He's in the US U20 player pool, so I'm sure there's voices in his ears. I'm pretty sure he signed a Generation Adidas contract already, but I'm sure he's being pushed in that direction by the U20 coaching staff that wants to make him part of the qualifying process later this year. So, Robinson's probably not as much of an immediate impact type guy, but has a lot of the tools that you could see. If he comes along and develops, then there's going to be hope for him to be a major contributor. Maybe next year, as soon as next year.
Travis, I do look at, and this is where I will defend the draft a little bit. I look at a guy like Nick Hagelin and his role that he had with TFC in the playoff run, and this is a guy that I think a few years prior might have been already cast aside, or might have been playing in the NASL or something by then, because he just really didn't contribute all that much outside of a few bright spots in his rookie year. The point I'm making with this is the USL situation, the ability to hold players on your roster for a longer period of time might eventually make the middle area of this draft a little bit more valuable to teams. What are your thoughts on what role the USL partnership has played in the evolution of the super draft?
Well, you can look at a super draft, and depending on, what teams' rosters look like, and you could just simply see it as a chance to stock a USL team. Now obviously there are there are teams that aren't running their own programs or don't even have a USL affiliate. I know those teams are few and far between, and that kind of makes these like 28, 27 guys, 28, number 8, 28, 27 guys on the roster a little bit. You'll probably see them cut at the end of the year if they're picked. So obviously that's changed the dynamic for the drafts. It's opened up more opportunities for players in that sort of later range. Maybe you talk about college being for a late blooming soccer player. Well, it's almost like the USL system is a system for the late bloomers, if that makes sense. So I think the point you made is perfect. You'd have to kind of look team by team and go through some of the guys that have thrived in the USL system and ended up as big contributors on the MLS teams, on their respective MLS teams, to kind of really sort of break it down. But I think it adds a little bit more of an interest to the kind of the soccer diehards that be like, well, okay, who's going to end up seeing some minutes for my USL team or my team's USL team, if that's kind of their approach or thought process. So, you look at the draft and there's not going to be any big difference between sort of this year and last year, where there aren't more than 5 to 10 guys that end up as MLS. I really don't think there's going to be more than that. It's kind of the usual process. And, the USL, maybe that takes that number to 15 to 20 one day, 3-4 years down the road, for not all somewhere where we shouldn't be. I was going to make a pessimistic comment, but I refrain.
Okay, fair enough. So go ahead, Kevin.
Travis, I was going to ask you the same question that I asked Don Garber in the State of the League address a few weeks ago. With the rise of the homegrown players, what's the future of the Super Draft in the next 5-10 years?
So this is I believe my 5th or 6th college season doing it, and pretty much after the first 1 or 2 Super Drafts that I attended, I was ready to do away with it. I still am ready to do away with it. I think the combination of the homegrown system and creating more of an open system, there's more teams out there. Why are we making this draft? First of all, why is it the Super Draft? I know why it is. It's a combination of drafts, whatever. But we don't need a draft, basically. I kind of write this every year. It helps our website's traffic. I appreciate all the fans that come check it out and read it. It's this sort of North American obsession that when we're looking at soccer outside the context of North America, this doesn't exist. I'm all for some kind of system where, maybe if you really, really need to reinforce this whole, the worst team gets the top pick or whatever, maybe give them a little bit more money to offer players instead of doing this stupid draft process. Make these teams put the work into it. And, there's scouting networks that some teams have, other teams just send their assistants. There's a better way to do it. Let's make it a less big of a deal. We don't need this whole hoopla for 3 or 4 guys who may be okay, and most players that fans have never heard of, because there aren't a lot of pro soccer. There's not a big intersection of pro here. I mean, there are some, obviously, but I'm meandering and making a longer answer than I need to be, but I basically think that it needs to just go away. Kind of mechanism in place, but we don't need the draft as it stands, in my opinion.
if you look at
I don't know if it'll go away though.
No,
So,
exactly. So if it doesn't go away, Travis, a theory that I've been working on more, an idea that's been brewing in my head over the last few weeks after I was challenged by that question, what possibly could the draft be? And here's my theory. Could you have a draft open to players, not just from college? Yeah, you still have the players from college, but you open to academy players, to players that are maybe 16 and over, 17 and over, because soccer is a little bit younger sport than other sports where it's 18 for the draft. But you don't have in NFL. NFL is a different model, sorry. But if you go to baseball, if you go to hockey, the way the draft works has nothing to do with the school, has all the thing to do with just the age of the player. He makes himself eligible for the draft, and then he could be drafted. How about we just make it an age barrier? And if you qualify with your age, you can submit your application to the draft and you could be drafted.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that you can open it to more players. You don't need this Generation Adidas program necessarily. I get why they do it. It provides some, a little more financial incentive to it, but at the end of the day, it really makes you think, well, there's got to be a better way. But as we can say in many other things in life, there are better ways to do things. I think one thing that comes to mind in your idea that stands out to me is the shaky track record. And, this goes back to Duane's USL point. You just don't see from a lot of MLS teams. And, maybe I'm not tracking the league as closely as I am, trying to develop and make their players better. There's this, shuffle and search to, bringing in new players and make that's how our team is going to get better, instead of, putting players in position in a league where there's no pro rel, there's the consequences, depending where you are minimal at best. Why not try to force the initiative to become more of a development-minded league? Whether that's with the first team, whether that's with the USL team, and I know that's what the USL team's doing. You're seeing it a lot more, I think. That's kind of what we've discussed north of the border with the Canadian teams in Vancouver and Toronto. Where they're able to kind of make that bridge a little bit more forceful. But that's, again, part of the education package. Whatever, there's a lot of pieces moving on in that sense. So I think that would be my one counter argument to that is not only is the MLS club's track record kind of shaky when it comes to development, but a lot of, especially in the United States, I don't know about Canada, your 16, 17, 18-year-olds aren't ready for college soccer, much less Major League Soccer or professional soccer. So, there's special players out there. There are other exceptions, but that would kind of muddy the waters a bit and make it a little bit more difficult to kind of line things up, if you will.
Yeah, I think you'd have to have the USL system a little stronger first. There's not a lot of Alfonso Davies out there, right? There's
Exactly.
a lot more guys that are just going to disappear. Travis, you mentioned the Generation Adidas program, and after we let you go, Kevin and I are going to talk about the Canadian Generation Adidas program, which is part of the new sort of bone that MLS threw Canadian teams around the MLS Cup final there to try and address the Canadians as domestics issue that's been ongoing for a while. In the course of just the 10 years that TFC's been in the league, and that I've followed it more closely than I had previously, the Generation Adidas program seems to have gone from being this major thing where you absolutely wanted to get these Generation Adidas players to something where I just don't think that it's seen quite the same way. And in fact, there's this term, Generation Adidas bomb, in which you're sort of, after the guy's GA status rolls out, you're stuck with this big contract that for a player that didn't really earn it, and so on and so forth. So just what your thoughts are on the GA program right now, and whether it's still working close to the way it once did, or they designed it to work.
Well, if it's designed to get you to say Adidas more, maybe that's what the Adidas is paying for, just the brand, right? So in that case, it's working for the casual soccer fan, but the casual MLS fan, I guess I should say. I think it kind of goes back to the last point I was making about development and how good MLS teams have been at it. Player identification. I've seen some really bad, I like to think that MLS teams scout college soccer better than me. I could be wrong, but you see some choices that just make you kind of scratch your head and think, what are these guys doing with that kid? That kid's not ready. Just leave him in school, leave him be, and maybe he'll work out. On the other hand, some guys I feel like who could have been pro soccer players already aren't offered enough money, or it's not worth their while, or whatever. So, like all things in soccer and pro sports and development, not every single player is going to work out. So you just kind of roll your dice. And it'd be interesting. I feel like I think I did this 2 or 3 years ago, kind of looking back at the Generation Adidas classes. It would be interesting to go through and, kind of map out their careers, see where they ended up. I believe I have the article on the website, but I think it's quite dated. Maybe I did it for the 2014 draft or something like that. Maybe even 2013, which is frightening to think about, just how much time has gone by. So I like the Canadian Generation Adidas. It baffles my mind, sort of this the struggle, and I know you guys see it much more, and with the whole Canadians classified. I guess you can answer one of my questions. So are Canadian GA kids not going to count as internationals now? Is that what the thinking is? Or
Travis, you're familiar with Major League Soccer, right? It's clear as mud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's just like, I think that's a big part of it, right? So, when you're looking at Canadian kids who are seniors going to the draft, one of the things you never really know is this kid's going to be an international. Does he have a green card? And how that's going to impact his draft status, because that a team is going to probably want to go to like South America, find a 19, 20, 21-year-old, and use that guy, roll a dice on that international spot, rather than a 22, 23-year-old Canadian kid that's played 4 years of college soccer. So, as we said, it's clear as mud. I saw that the news yesterday broke that the FC Edmonton kid, Shamit Chome, is going to be a part of the draft, which I find very interesting, and much more interesting than the sort of that random, like, I don't know if it's going to continue. Maybe this GA Canada thing is in a place where they pluck the internationals, and they've had a success of one Joel Plaza for every 50 or 60 total Caribbean guys that have come through and just kind of flopped. So I think that approach is better when you're making preparations. Again, it's just going to be interesting to see how it's managed. And I had totally missed this announcement too, and just found out about it a week or two ago. So it's going to be interesting to see its impact on the draft, because you think a guy like, if a guy like Chome, if I'm pronouncing his name right, he's got 26 NASL appearances. That's much more of a track record than, I would argue, than a kid that's played 4 years of college ball for most kids. So is he going to be a top 5 draft? Is he only going to go to a Canadian team? What's kind of going on there behind that, and pushing him into the pool, and MLS is paying a transfer fee for him too, supposedly. So that's going to be a very fascinating wrinkle, I think, next week.
And just to let you know that the other player that we're hearing up here that might be part of the GA Canada program is Adehoya Reed, who plays in League One Ontario, which is a semi-pro league that I, of course, have an affection with. And get your bingo card out, listeners, because I talk about League One Ontario all the time. So it's kind of a different look, different kind of player coming in, guys that have played against men as opposed to guys that have played against college kids. At any rate, Travis, before we let you go, I know this is a bit of a dart exercise, but is there one player that's kind of off people's radar that you're excited about that you think might jump up in the draft?
You mean like this year's version of Tsubasa Endo?
Yeah.
There are a couple of guys. Honestly, as you said, it's a bit of a dartboard. I'm gonna throw a bone to your Canadian listeners. I think the kid from Vermont, Brian Wright, I've heard good things about. Seems to have sort of that intriguing, package of pace, technical ability, power up front. He's the kind of guy that looks like he can handle the challenges from your Bobby Burlings or your Nick Haglunds right away, as opposed to some of the guys that need some, I guess, a little more refinement. And then I know that other folks aren't as high on him, but another Ontario native, Chris Nako from Syracuse, I think he's someone that also could sneak in under the radar. Not exactly someone that comes to mind first and foremost when looking at the draft pool, but again, with sort of this lack of attacking talent, those are two guys that I think could sneak up towards the top of the draft. There are a couple of Spanish kids where you're sort of like, they're really good soccer players, but is an MLS team again going to drop that international spot on them? So you look at a guy like Jorge Gomez Sanchez from Temple, again, not a program you're going to think of first and foremost. Guillermo Delgado, a Spanish forward from Delaware that spent time with Real Madrid before coming here. Again, his obvious asset is pace, and that can go a long way in Major League Soccer, as Dominic Odoro can attest to.
Of course, Dominic Odoro. All right, Travis Clark, as always, we do thank you for your time. Top Drawer Soccer is the place. The first mock draft's out there. Got a couple more coming down the pipe, I assume.
Yeah, probably one or two more at most. The combine starts this weekend, so we'll see how things shake out there. All right, thanks again for your time, Travis.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good day, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back, and thanks again to Travis. Kevin, I don't know, finish your thought on the draft there. You mentioned you like the age restriction thing. Has your feelings evolved since you asked Mr. Garber the question?
No, it's still the same thing. You know, when you think about, not always put it other sports, but if you have to have a draft, if that weekend, because yes, that weekend is very interesting. It's the culmination of the National Soccer Coach Association.
Yes.
That acronym that I always mixed up with all the other acronyms, but yes, that weekend, it's the final of that convention. It's that big day, the floor, the energy, the contact, the networking between the organizations. That is important. So fine, have a draft. But maybe with the proliferation of academies across North America, with the growth of homegrowns everywhere and outside of Major League Soccer as well, how about we find a way to get more players younger, get maybe drafted, change the idea of the draft of getting players that you're actually going to have. You draft them, and then you're going to put in the top system of your academy, and then they're going to become part of your first team. Maybe that's the way to change it. And to do that, you need to lower the age, not necessarily just focus on college kids, and have I don't mean college kids to be dismissive, by the way. It's the expression, but to put, like, I don't know, 16 and 17 and over, or 18, and then you declare yourself for the draft, then you go to the combine, and you prove yourself, and you could be drafted.
Yeah, I mean, look, exactly. If they're going to continue with the draft, I prefer a more open process as well. I've always had an issue with the fact that the CIS kids aren't available to be drafted. I mean, I'm not going to suggest here or sit here and suggest that there's going to be hundreds of them out there that are somehow missing a pro opportunity. But you know what? If there were one, if there was one that an MLS team wanted to take a flyer on, there's really no provision to do so right now other than to sign them as a free agent, which really restricts them because of all the reasons we've talked about many times before to the three Canadian teams. Kevin, let's move on to the Generation Adidas conversation that I wanted to have about the new program here in Canada. And apologies to FC Edmonton fans out there. I don't actually remember whether it's Chome or Shome. Maybe one of our live listeners can tag in if they know exactly, but we'll call him Shamit. We'll call the other fellow Reed because his first name is a mouthful. So Shamit and Reed are the two guys that are most likely going to be signed. Reed is a forward. Well, as I said, he played in League One Ontario here, was one of their top scorers for a couple years ago. He's a dynamic player that is talking to someone in League One this morning about him just to, kind of get a reminder of exactly what kind of qualities he's brings. What it was described to me is it's hard to put a finger on exactly what's good about him, but there's something good about him. But it's kind of like he's a rough diamond that you need to polish, right? That's neither here nor there with a guy that's never really been in a pro environment. So that's kind of a good news if he can get in there. He had a trial in Europe, didn't quite work over there. So the fact that he may be getting a Generation Adidas opportunity in Canada is a good thing. With Shamit, I think that Travis nailed it. That's a really intriguing thing to throw into this draft. If they're going to include guys that played professional soccer already and put them into an MLS, what would normally be an amateur draft, it's a fascinating little experiment.
Yes. But his case is particular because he was on an amateur contract with the FC Edmonton. So it's like not a one-off, but it's a special scenario.
True, but he still played in pro soccer, right?
Yes, he played in pro soccer, and it's through the Canadian Generation Adidas program that he finds himself in the draft, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, it's because we're not sure because it's clear as mud, this program, like many things MLS does. I think they're making things up on the fly. That's just the league and how it works. So you just kind of let it slide sometimes. And that is the other question. We do kind of need a little bit more transparency with this thing to totally evaluate whether or not it's going to be good for Canadian soccer. But that said, it's definitely going to be good for these two kids if they do get a contract. There's no doubt about that. They will get a professional opportunity. And that is the one great advantage of the GA program, is it does give these kids good financial incentive to come play in Major League Soccer for a while. The problem is, as I mentioned, there is, for the teams, from the team perspective, that there's lately in the last few drafts been a reluctance to completely buy in to the GA players, because I think what's happened is, with the homegrown program evolving, the players that would have been GA players in the draft before are now homegrown players that are, those are the ones that are closer to can't miss, and the players that are now GA players would not have gotten a GA contract back 5, 6, 7 years ago. So really, you're taking a flyer on a chance, on a risk, and you don't want to do that, because even though he doesn't count against the cap, there's going to come a time where he graduates and you've had that spot there, and now you have to deal with this thing, and it's sometimes more of a pain for these teams than not, so they choose to go outside of it.
Yeah, and by the way, Wayne, I know you feel the same way. We have nothing against the fact that they get paid a lot of money. That's all well and good. We're talking about in a salary cap league where eventually it does come into play. Hard decision needs to be taken for the better of the whole than one individual, and has nothing to do with the big amount of salary. Good for him, but it's against the cap eventually. It's a big hit.
All right. We're running a bit late, but real quick, not a lot going on for the Canadian teams in this year's draft. The top pick, for those who don't know, are the Whitecaps are in the 7th position. They do maintain their natural pick. Montreal does not draft until all the way down to number 19, and TFC does not currently have a first-round draft pick, which means that they don't have a pick within the first 22 picks of the draft. So there's not a lot going on. It's not a draft that Canadian fans are going to be all that interested in. But it is a draft I think Minnesota United fans are going to be interested in. I think it's a draft that's going to be very interesting to see what Atlanta United does with, because right now their tendency has to sort of been to look outward rather than inward for their players. And I could possibly see, because of that very reason, the number 2 pick, which is held by Atlanta, being on the market right now, because they just don't seem like a team that this is the way that they're going to go, Kevin.
Yeah, it could be a big possibility. Yeah.
All right, and what's that worth? Well, maybe in the days ahead, I'll revise my little study that I do every year, and we'll have an idea. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in the days ahead. But in the meantime, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with a couple with the little MLS expansion talk, and perhaps we'll talk about Chelsea.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, FeedBurner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Oh, Miami.
Yeah, will it ever happen? That's the question, and I still go with my prediction that no, it's not.
I mean, I've been to Tampa Bay and I've been to Miami, and South Beach is, it's sexy, it's cool, it's got a lot of celebrities there and all that, and it's a very David Beckham kind of place. He's going to try and take his talents there to steal the guy that lives in Cleveland's the line from a few years ago now. That said, Tampa's kind of nice. There's beaches there. It's not a long drive to Miami if you really want to live in that lifestyle. So it makes some sense that maybe if they're not going to get their together in Miami, and there's this huge effort going on in Tampa Bay, that maybe if someone reaches out to you, like it's been suggested this happened, that David Beckham might move his talents from the
Miami
Atlantic side to the
project
Gulf
to
side.
maybe. And you know what? If you're looking at pragmatically as well in Major League Soccer, the last few expansions that have gathered success, and okay, it's still too early maybe to tell about NYCFC and Orlando, but before that, the clubs like Seattle Sounders, the Montreal Impact, the Vancouver Whitecaps came into the league with existent infrastructures, organization, knowledge, experience, and that has paid dividend, not just on the pitch, but maybe more importantly, in a business model, in the stands, in the ticket office, in the bank. So that might be a good idea for the future for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, look, and as soon as Tampa Bay decided to sort of take themselves out of that, in your face kind of approach that was the NASL and try and start working with MLS, with that historic name, it's not the Cosmos, but you know what? The Rowdies is damn close to as associated with that era and is fondly thought of as the Cosmos. It's pretty close. As soon as that started to happen, I immediately started to think that exactly what we're suggesting right now, that maybe this Miami bid, if it doesn't happen, that they might just make that move. And then they made the Tampa Bay group made another move this week where they added an executive from Orlando that was part of their bid to get into Major League Soccer. And this is, obviously that was a successful bid. So they're doing a lot of things right now that make me think that that they have to be high on the list of potential candidates coming in, because as you said, I just can't see Miami getting together. It started right with that stupid press conference 5 years ago now. Like, it made no sense. Like, oh, we're here to announce that we're announcing that we might announce is what it was, like the most ridiculous press conference ever. It was very sexy. Like, I remember there was this
here, Duane. It was a photo op.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Yeah, they brought David Beckham on. There was some local TV personality down there,
like four fans.
Beautiful Latina woman up there. There was some dancing. There was music. There was 4 or 5 fans. It was kind of fun but ultimately empty, which is no offense to anyone who really truly loves South Beach, which is fun and but ultimately kind of empty is kind of how I describe it.
One thing though that comes to mind is, look, 2017, we know Minnesota and Atlanta are coming this season. We're in 2017 now. Next year, at this 1 year from now, LAFC is coming in, and you don't want a league with a number again. So technically, it's supposed to be 2, and that spot would have been Miami, apparently. But what if it's Tampa Bay? It's only a year from now. What if they play this year in the USL and they transition to Major League Soccer like Orlando did? Maybe that's the pathway. Maybe that's what's going to happen, because you only have not even a year now to get ready. And it's a lot easier to take Tampa Bay and work around them and create the Rowdies for Major League Soccer in 2018 than to build everything from scratch in 12 months.
Yeah. Look, and that's long been suggested, particularly by people in Sacramento, that if Miami couldn't get its crap together, that Sacramento would get that spot. As I said on our prediction show, the longer it goes without Sacramento getting an official nod from Major League Soccer, the more worried I am. That is not to say that I can't be wrong with that, and I'm being overly cynical, but
they were in the list that they talked about during the MLS Cup week. The week after the MLS Cup week, when the expansion details were announced, Sacramento was one of the names mentioned, but one of the 12. So would it be sooner rather than later? I don't know. The 2018 spot is coming soon, and Sacramento is a good option, a viable option, for the same reason that I mentioned Tampa Bay would, because of the existing infrastructures. And when I say infrastructures, I'm not talking about just physical infrastructures. Those are stadiums have to be upgraded, bigger, or even change venues. I'm talking about more the employees working, the executive already in play, the business model, those type of infrastructures.
Yeah, well, Sacramento will be the safest launch they could put forward. It would absolutely be a success. There's no doubt about that. I think where Major League Soccer comes down right now is they believe that they can go into any market and be a success. It's levels of it, right? Like, yeah, they can go to Sacramento and be successful without much effort, but maybe they put a little bit of effort in and they get into a bigger market. That's kind of where I think they come down. But no, to get back to the Florida stuff, I do think it is, as I've said many times, that that there's a desire to get a natural rival for Orlando in there that can, be close, and that they can have that derby situation. And Orlando Tampa would be, pretty close to an authentic derby, in the sense like authentic. I use that to mean like Europe, so like a close geographical drivable kind of derby. So I think that that's desirable for them. If you had to guess right now, before we move on to the Chelsea stuff, and we've talked about expansion a lot, but if you had to guess right now what the next four expansion cities are, Kevin, just off the top of your head, where would you put them?
Okay, if I have 4, Tampa Bay is one of the 4. I don't know about Sacramento. I would try to find a way to get San Francisco, because for some reason I think a team in San Francisco would revitalize not just San Francisco, but it would revitalize the Quakes. Yeah, they have a new stadium, but it's not as easy on the pitch, and they're kind of it is a classical because of it's in California with LA, but it's so far away. If they would have San Francisco team, I think that would be awesome. I would actually like San Francisco. It wasn't even mentioned in the 12. I would. Other cities missing. Oh, it's because now we have 3. St. Louis, or maybe a Cincinnati in the Midwest. Yeah, I know it's St. Louis is the gateway to it. Maybe that is the answer as well, to have more of a national or North American coverage, and that's a part that has been forgotten for decades now.
Yeah, look, I mean, I do believe that they will put a couple of teams more in the Midwest, and St. Louis is their primary target, and I believe Cincinnati is their backup plan when it comes to St. Louis, that if St. Louis can't get a stadium built, if they can't get an ownership group together, that they'll bypass them again. They've lasted this long without them. They can continue to last, but they will always be the dream that they have. Cincinnati, I do believe, is just like kind of Tampa Bay was dependent on Miami not getting in, and I think it's the same thing with Cincinnati. That doesn't mean that it won't happen, as we're talking about now. I still maintain Detroit is a market that they really, really, really want. So if something can get worked out there, I think that would be the other Midwest sort of place that they would go into. It's funny you mentioned San Francisco, and there's nothing really there happening right now. And obviously the Quakes are very close. San Jose and San Francisco are kind of all part of the Bay Area.
Cross the bridge.
Yeah, but at the same time, if they feel that market is strong enough, I could see potentially them maybe not in the top next 4, but in the next 6, because they aren't going to stop at 4 guys. Let's not kid ourselves. I could see that for sure. So that 4th one is kind of up in the air for me, and I do think that Sacramento remains in their back pocket, and if they do get in, it will be that 4th team unless something else emerges. Some other sexy spot emerges, and I don't even know where possibly that could be, because you're kind of running out of spots in the middle. I mean, you San Antonio is an option for a 3rd Texas.
Well, if the Spurs are rumored to be implicated into a potential San Antonio, well, they are in the USL, so maybe if eventually they want to. I think they have been open about having MLS.
Yeah, they have, yeah.
So there you go. That actually might be more viable or potential than we think.
Yeah. All right. We have 3 minutes left in the block. Let's talk about Chelsea, and they're going for the record today against Spurs. With Arsenal's, well, they did come back. They did get the draw, but
so many games.
You don't want
so many games in last. You mentioned you forgot a few days ago. Well, that was me yesterday. I'm like, oh yeah, there's games today.
Yeah, and I'm going to go to the gym this afternoon and watch this thing, but nonetheless, it's going to be
gym. Nice resolution. Yeah, it's January 4th.
There you go. I'm not going to go instead of going to a bar to watch the game. I'm going to go to the gym to watch the game.
You'll see. The gym will be effing crowded. Yeah, the gym's going to be crowded. Like, this is the worst time to go to the gym. There's so many people. Wait 2 weeks.
There you go.
But all right, going back to Chelsea, speaking of gyms, Chelsea have been going to the gyms lately with their 13 wins in a row, a record that they're going for today against the Spurs to beat the record of Arsenal of 2002, that great Gunners team that went out to win the league in 2002-2003 unbeaten, a great team that has been talked about in the last few days if you listen to Premier League broadcast. It is going to be interesting to see if they can get it done, how they get it done, Conte's tactics, and the revolutionary type of formation that he's been using. It's nothing revolutionary, but the fact that he's making it work in the Premier League is a bit revolutionary. A 3-4-3 started the season with a normal formation, made the player believe in his formation, and look where we are today. 13 games later, 13 wins, going for the 14th top of the league. Are they going to get the record? I think so. I think you don't. It's not a coincidence. Their play. Some players been moving in and out, some injuries, but because of their non-European presence, it does give them a focus that we've seen pay dividend.
Yeah, well, yeah, and look, I tweeted out yesterday after Arsenal drew that game. Congratulations to Chelsea for winning the title. I was being somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but not completely. If you've listened to the show, you know my position on that. Do I think that they get the win today over Spurs? I mean, all signs point to yes, to use my magic 8-ball. And on that note, Kevin, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with some bits and bites to end the show.
The bits and bites on Soccer Today. Again, St. Clair, January 20th in Ottawa.
Again. Sorry. It's catchy.
It is a very good. Available. Cheating. Available everywhere.
All right. If you're a band out there that wants to have your music featured on the Soccer Today podcast, give us a shout and we'll have a chat. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
On that note,
exactly. We don't promise anything, and just let us know. sportspodcasting@gmail.com.
All right. Kevin, let's start. We mentioned it with Travis, the Ashley Lawrence signing with PSG. First off, is that both genders combined? Maybe the biggest team that a Canadian has ever signed for?
Maybe. It's a good question. But okay, do we call it an exodus yet? Do we call it an exodus of North American women's soccer player from the NWSL to Europe, at least for the next 6 months? It's not just U.S. women's national team player. It's Canadians, it's Mexicans, it's South Americans, the European Champions League, the England FA Women's League, France. They're all getting better. In Europe, they're using the infrastructures of the men, which is very high. Outside of development, the academies, now it's been 5-6 years women's have been involved and included, and we're seeing the results now. The Champions League in the women's side is becoming something special in Europe now.
Yeah, and look, I obviously with Morgan going to Lyon and now Ashley Lawrence, maybe one of the best prospects coming out of the NCAA choosing to go to PSG, you're seeing France become a prime destination for the top players in the world in the women's side. And I think maybe the French league might be the French have always on the women's side of the game been kind of leaders, the Scandinavians too, but lately sort of in the second wave of female football, I think that the French have shown to be amongst the traditional powers of the game, the most open-minded, the most I shouldn't even call it open-minded, you should just like sensible, I'll say, about including the women in the game, right? So, and I think it's a natural evolution that their league might start to open up a little bit more to try and position itself as maybe the best women's league in the world, and we're seeing sort of moves that suggest that kind of motivation, that kind of desire to be that, Kevin. And in terms of what it means to the NWSL, I think what it means to the NWSL is they're going to need to make some structural changes to their contract. Like Ashley Lawrence was always going to be stuck on the Canadian allocation money there. There's a provision within the NWSL players union, like their collective bargaining agreement, that says that the American women, the American national team women, must be the highest paid player on their teams. That's going to hold that league back until they get rid of that particular clause. And it's not a clause that gets talked about a lot when the American women are talking to the press, right? But nonetheless, it's something that needs to change if we're going to see that league grow. And I'm not even, like we've said this a couple times in the recent days, I'm not even that worried about the NWSL not being the best women's league in the world. Maybe it's good for the game to get it out of its North American and Scandinavian roots and into more traditional areas of the world where the sport thrives on a different level. There's better infrastructure there. There's better media coverage there. There's better potential there, in my opinion. And so I applaud this and wish and hope that Khadijah Buchanan follows her, and hopes that in a couple of years Jessie Fleming follows her too, and stays away from the purely American system.
You know what I want to see, Duane? I don't know if it's going to happen. I want to see Christine St. Clair go in Europe and play for a big club. Why not?
I don't think it's going to happen either. She's pretty happy in Portland.
I know
personally.
And I know, and maybe it's just me and my selfishness wanting to see her play with the best in the world and prove that she might be the best ever and continue on that run of scoring. Pull a Zlatan late in your career, go to a big league and dominate. Why not? That would be fun to see.
Yeah, no, and look, I've long thought about that, but realistically, having had the opportunity to speak with her a few times over the years, I don't name drop when I say that. I'm trying to spin into this point. Yeah, I just don't get the sense that that's her personality. But nonetheless, you're right. That would be something that would be exceptional to see. So, but that said, I think that the next generation, the Ashley Lawrences, the Khadijah Buchanans, the Jessie Flemings, the Janine Becky's, the players like that, I think that we could realistically look at them and say, well, why don't we get them over there? Why don't we see whether we can test their waters, which will ultimately, I'm not saying that the Canadian Soccer Association should step away from the NWSL partnership.
No, because we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, well, and if Ashley Lawrence goes to PSG, that means that there's one more spot that's going to be available for a young Canadian to give them an allocated spot. So it trickles down. You're just getting more playing opportunities. And obviously,
if you take the top off, it just creates more players to fill that top.
Exactly.
And right, let's go to the other news in the NWSL right now. Apparently, there's going to be Vancouver Whitecaps are interested about an NWSL team, according to Michael Nicole of the Sporting News.
Yeah, and look, this surprises me. When Sinclair was on the press call and I asked her directly about this stuff, she did actually say directly that she would like to see a couple, she said, Canadian NWSL teams in the next couple years. Now, I sort of tried not to read too much in between the lines in the way that she said it, but it did actually, in the way she said it, now that this news is coming out, sound like maybe she might have heard something. And she is in position to have maybe heard something. Now, the couple is interesting. You would assume that there would be an Eastern tag in as well.
Well, let's start with Vancouver used to have a women's team. So their history with the women's soccer is existent. Apparently, Montreal has no desire, and I've been talking about this before. We need a PLSQ Women's League, and we need a team of the highest level possible, affiliated or not with the Montreal Impact in Montreal. Yeah, it might not draw crowds, not for the reason, but I think eventually playing opportunity needs to exist for women, and you need to create it, and eventually need to figure out a way to make it work. But yeah, you have to take a leap of faith. And I do think that Montreal is a worthy sports city to have that. Same for Toronto and same for Vancouver. So good on the Whitecaps if the rumblings of them wanting to create an NWSL side is true.
Yes, I'll just take this opportunity to very quickly say that I think, ethically speaking, the amount of profit and money that MLSE makes on all sports to extend their brand into a women's team, even if it lost them a little bit of money, I think that would be the right thing to do.
Look at the Canadiens in the Canadian Hockey League for women, Canadian Women Hockey League in Canada. The Canadiens have a partnership with the Montreal Canadiens. They've played at the Bell Center a few times, and not with the best of crowds, but bigger crowds than they had before. And they're the Montreal Canadiens, the Habs partnership with media, or just like their popularity and their branding helps promote, helps give more visibility to Les Canadiens, and that is all for the best. And I hope that model, even a bigger partnership between clubs exists in soccer in my city.
Yeah, and look, with people that are actively talking about investing pretty heavily in soccer in this country right now, it stands to reason that at least one of those groups that we have not yet completely had confirmed might also be interested in starting something on the women's side as well, to extend that brand that they're trying to create. So don't be shocked, be surprised, because it will be surprising, but don't be shocked if you saw, pulling this out of my elbow, there's nothing to this, to be clear, if you saw Hamilton try and start a women's team, or London, or somewhere like that might be involved in the Canadian Premier League project. We'd all like to see the Canadian Premier League extended to a women's side eventually, but if one of those investing groups also extended that brand, if they had the money to do it, to try and get into the NWSL and make themselves stronger out of the launch with 2 clubs, then hey, that would be pretty ambitious, but I would applaud it, and I think it all would, Kevin.
And if you're going to have a Canadian Women Premier League, bring back the Comets. I want my Laval Comets back. You hear?
The Laval Comet himself has spoken. All right, Kevin, that's the last thing I have on the agenda today is Bob Bradley, and we've talked a lot about Mr. Bradley.
What a great conversation that was, Duane. Not us, but Grant Wall with Bob Bradley on his latest Planet Football.
Yeah, and there's a couple interviews too he's done in England. He's speaking out in a way that you don't normally see fired managers speak out. That is maybe the last bit of Americanism that he's going to add to the equation over there. He's very outspoken, and I just what I have is this is good or bad. Is it good or bad for him? I think it's good for us.
I think it's good for everybody. Why? Because hey, you want to treat me like this? Well, Honest Bob is Honest Bob in the locker room with the players, with the front offices. It might have been to his detriment, but he's doing the same with the media. So he's just being consequent with himself. And you know what? If you can be yourself amongst all what happened in the last 10 days, well, good on you, Bob. I applaud you for it.
Yeah, and look, and a couple of things that stuck out there. He did actually say in the interview with Grant Wall today, and I encourage you to go to listen. Planet Football. It's on Grant Wall's feed. I retweeted it this morning. You can probably find it pretty easily. Do have a listen. It's about a 30-minute interview. He did say that his honesty with the players might have bit him in the ass a little bit in the end. And Grant asked him directly about the Americanism stuff and whether or not he felt that he was unfairly treated. And his line I thought was pretty good. If I'm angry about a referee's decision and I say PK instead of penalty at the end of the game, I don't think that's the biggest failing that I ever had. And that's a fair point. And that's a point that I think most North American listeners did agree with. Although that said, Kevin, PK needs to be shot into the sun.
Yeah. Okay, fine. But it's a penalty kick. It's still whatever.
It's a penalty. Just a penalty.
Fine. All right. But let's put it the example where it works. Would you tell Conte not to call it calcio?
Yeah, no, and that is a fair point as well. And that is always the fair point with the football soccer junk, which is the most ridiculous argument that you ever get into with this.
Here, Duane, did we berate Floro for calling it football?
No.
Exactly.
Well, my favorite thing too is when you're talking to European or English or whatever managers, people that come in when I interview them, and they go out of their way when they say football just instinctively, and they go, well, I guess I should call it soccer here. And I always feel like interrupting and go, you can call whatever the hell you want.
You can call it round ball as long as we know what you're talking about. In my opinion, it's fair.
Yeah, and look, I'll interchangeably use football and soccer, and it's only been actually, to try to tell you the truth, even though I have people in my family of English descent, and with accents in the whole 9 yards, I've never been fully comfortable referring to it as football because it always feels like, because of my accent, that I'm trying too hard when I say it. So that's kind of where I come down on that. But at the same, but I kind of went through a phase like most of us do, where I went out of the way to always use the British terms, and that's why I use terms like penalty and I use terms like pitch, and I use those kind of easily because they've always been in my vocabulary.
Well, yeah, it makes it sound cool too. So we use them.
But when it comes to soccer, I mean, I played soccer growing up.
Yeah,
I kind of take pride in the fact that we cover soccer because that's what we call it in North America, and it's always faced a lot of challenges. And one day I dream of seeing a soccer team win a World Cup. I think that would be a remarkable thing for the sport.
Well,
I don't think.
To be fair, Duane, every World Cup is won by a soccer team. No.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I know. I was being a bit cute.
I know. Me too.
But I will still celebrate when the Australians win that World Cup one day.
Oh, maybe that's gonna happen. Well, for sure that's gonna happen probably before Canada, because actually the Aussies actually get there.
Yes, exactly. And that was just me taking the piss out of our American listeners. Love you guys. All right, on that note, Kevin,
hello.
As always, Kevin, get me out of trouble. Say goodbye.
All right. Chelsea Tottenham today. Chelsea going for the record. And just to finish the show with a little bit, that's not breaking news, but let's talk about Chelsea for another second. Chelsea are open to maybe loaning out Ruben Loftus-Cheek in January because he's not getting the playing time he deserves to truly become a Chelsea prospect. And until tomorrow, 11 a.m. live for Soccer Today, well, have a great soccer. Chelsea. gets the record.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.